Hello, hello. Hi, Kaylee. Happy birthday. Matt, hello, hello, hello. Hi. You must be, Seymour Matt, you must be on cloud 9 this evening. Today, what am I drinking is going to be Deschutes Black Butte Porter, which is lovely. I like the flavor of it. And Kaylee had a birthday yesterday, which is also pretty awesome. Yeah, it's really yummy. Just, a little chocolatey. I like it. Definitely a quaffer. Well, hi. I did not expect to see you on here, but hello. I'm so happy to see new people, or people I haven't seen in forever. If anybody knows Industrial Girl, she has the smoothest skin in the universe. It is so soft. Hope you're doing well. You're still up in Portland, right? So for tonight, I am hoping that people use the down there, maybe for you, or somewhere along here, the question button. Oh, Seattle, okay. From down here, they're all the same, Portland and Seattle. Use the little question button. That way, I think what's going to happen is if anybody asks a question, I can respond to it. Everybody sees the question I'm answering. And when I save the video, I'm hoping that those questions stay in the feed. So when I post these later to YouTube, other people can see what was the question. Just be aware that if you ask a question, only like 2 sentences worth of question. Any more than that seems to get cut off, judging by other people's response. Hi, Hannah. Good afternoon. Oh, it's evening now. Good evening. So I hope you've all had a really good day. My day was mostly pretty boring because security updates over the weekend, and that meant that my Outlook profile was rebuilding for like 6.5 hours today, so I didn't get a whole lot done as far as like external work, but I got some of my project work done, and that's good. Trying to get as much of my projects done getting ready for surgery. Oh my gosh, it's coming up fast. Yeah, it took forever. It was just a ridiculous amount of time for the stupid Outlook profile. And my boss is messaging me and they're like, why aren't you answering? I'm like, well, this isn't working, and my cell phone, I've got no signal at work, which is ridiculous. So, not the most ideal situation, but it was good to get some stuff done with nobody bugging me. Lots of stuff going on. So one thing is we've got Pride coming up for Phoenix on April 6th and 7th. I think for the 6th I'm going to table with TSAZ, Trans-Spectrum of Arizona, in the afternoon. I think they got a whole lot of volunteers though, so I might not be doing that. Oh, thank you. I got it at Ross. I like this shirt too. It's pretty happy, and I like the way it looks against my hair. I like the colors. So, and then Sunday, I'm still trying to find out if the Veteran Association is going to be, or not Veteran Association, just VAMC, is going to be marching in the parade. They're finding out from, the LGBT coordinators are finding out from corporate or their higher-ups if they're allowed to. And if they are, then I'll march with them. If not, I will march with CVS Pride, who is marching with Glisten, which I work with. And Glisten, today was another trans discussion group at a local GSA, and I thought that was fascinating. There were so many people there today. It was awesome. Can't really talk about everything we talked about, but I can talk in generalities. And it's just such a different world for trans youth and the worries that they have compared to what we have as adults. I mean, it's such a strange difference, because I mean, we are at a point in our lives, I think everybody on here, I'm pretty sure I know everybody here, we're adults. We're experiencing things, and we have our own ramifications for what we do, but we mostly pay our own bills. We might be part of a team, but it's still, we're not wholly dependent on other people. And in a situation like that, or say somebody who's in a caretaker type position, or caretaken, perhaps severely limiting disability of some sort, or something like that, I can see where a lot more understanding, where it would be a very scary situation and very challenging to be who you know to yourself to be. Or if you don't know yourself, who exactly you haven't figured yourself out 100% yet, which I don't know if we all have, if any of us have, it might also be just even that you're questioning things could be a scary situation if you don't know. Are you going to be kicked out of your home? Are you going to be beaten in your home? That's a scary proposition, and it's a pretty awful spot to be in. I don't envy anybody in that situation. So one of the things that I think that I've been trying to formulate for a long time is, what did I do, and how did I set myself up for success? And so one day I'll write it all out. But so in '99, first time I intentionally presented female, and that was for a Halloween thing, and then after that it was Rocky Horror Picture Show, and then instantly into the goth scene, because that's where I could dress as I wanted to and not get a lot of side-eye. Androgyny and gender fucking was kind of just common in this scene. It wasn't a big deal. And but when I actually tried to come out to people around me, even just like, I'm thinking I like this, I got shot down pretty hard right off the bat. And so the world gave me an answer, which was, don't do that right now. I was scared. I was very scared. And somebody remind me, that brings me back to fear and the VA. Somebody write that down. Maybe I should. Robot Sunset. I'm not certain I know who you are. But hi, welcome. So throughout the next 17 years, I found that so much of my life led to this. It was kind of strange. And when I look back, I don't know that any of it was intentional, but I think it had a lot more to do with, I'm looking in hindsight and seeing how much of my life applies now in positive ways. Weird things, like I take shots for my estrogen. I don't know that at, what was I, 23 or something, I would have been in the right frame of mind to be taking shots for hormones. But being diabetic since I was 19, you get used to shots. You get used to penetrating your skin. Needles do not scare me anymore unless they're about 2 gauge or bigger. And it's just one of those things, like, well, if it hurts, it hurts, and usually it doesn't. Sometimes there might be some blood when you pull the needle out. Okay, that's fine. Stuff like that makes it just a little easy. I'm already fairly neurotic about my diabetes. Not as well controlled as I'd like, but I'm neurotic about it, so I'm used to being neurotic about making sure I take my medicines, making sure I'm, trying to do a lot of things in a very controlled manner. Dealing with a lot of the issues that I was going through, because Zoladex needles are brutal. Speaking of almost 2 gauge, no, I think it's around 10 or an 8 gauge needle, and it's It's a heck of a thing. And I found out, because one went in really shallow, the sucker's almost an inch long and just about an eighth of an inch in diameter that they insert into you, and that goes in through a needle that they stick in. It's pretty intense. But it lasts for a second and it doesn't hurt anymore because the fat tissue doesn't have pain receptors. Anyway, so the abuse I suffered as a child, abuse I survived as a child, set me up for a lifelong depression, anxiety, PTSD, all those lovely things. But I got a lot of care for those things. I went to mental health. I already had a good relationship with counselors. I had my toolboxes filled with all sorts of ways to cope with the bullshit of life. Doing this whole thing later in life, I started at 42, going through puberty again is a whole lot easier the second time around when you have a lifetime worth of experience behind you. It makes it just so much easier to handle the hormonal roller coaster. And it's still strange, still very evident, it happens, but it just definitely made it easier to handle. And I think that's one of those things that I say a lot, where it's like that, there's that hashtag I use, and that hashtag, yeah, all the hearts, the hashtag is, it gets better. I don't think it gets better. I think we handle it better. We grow our toolbox, we know how to handle situations, it gets more familiar, things get more comfortable in their strangeness, and I think that's what gets better, is how we deal with it. I think it's a misconception that it gets better like, well, just transition and everything will be okay. And no, it won't. It'll help you be in a state of mind where you can start working on all the rest of your problems, because it's just a small part of life. It's the most prevalent part of life right now, but it's not all of life, and it certainly isn't the best or the worst part of life. So it's just another part, and having more experience, it all syncs up. Hi, Lauren. Are you drinking wine tonight? I am drinking porter. So, having those conversations with the kids really reminds me of how much easier I have it than they have. Other things that helped, I didn't do a whole lot of makeup beforehand, but I had played around with it. Trying to find my style, being in the goth scene and being able to wear different things to see what fits and what doesn't fit. It wasn't as startling trying on women's clothes, because I'd been doing it for 2 decades by then. You can't really hear me. You're on a date with the wife. Oh, I didn't even know you were married. Say hello to your wife for us. So, yeah, everyone, I agree, Robot Sunset. You're glad you started at the age you did, even if it wasn't ideal. Everyone wishes they started younger. I think everyone wishes they started younger just because the physical changes, If I could have started pre-puberty, at least gotten on puberty blockers until I was old enough for some sort of treatment, sounds great, but that would have been 1993, and that would have been such a different environment, political environment. The landscape in the United States was completely different. The vocabulary was barely even there to understand us. Thank you, Lauren. The vocabulary wasn't there, and so having those discussions, like every little bit would have been a fight. So many people have come before us who've done so much heavy lifting that it almost feels easy now. The hardest parts are internally. The hardest parts are, for me, it wasn't just self-acceptance and accepting that I was a woman, and on top of that, accepting I was a trans woman. It's accepting that there's nothing wrong with being a woman. We're trained otherwise. But there's nothing wrong with being trans, but we're trained otherwise. And this isn't a death sentence any more than life is itself. We're all going to die. Some of us are going to die horribly. Some of us are going to die in random bullshit accidents. Some of us are going to be killed because of somebody breaking into your house and doing something awful, or you looked at somebody wrong that day that just happened to be the wrong set of circumstances. It's a very small portion. For the most part, nobody really cares what we're doing, so it's almost all internal. And the more I accept myself, the more nobody else really seems to care. Hi, Ariel Raven. I don't know if it's a play on words or if it's another way of spelling stuff in a different culture. But yeah, so these things are just like so much light of life just makes this thing. Yes, wears it like an armor. Yes. Okay, so I have a story for that. When I was about 25, maybe, I used to hang out with a couple named Dos and Christy. Hi, Abra, welcome. So Dos and Christy, she had a lot of mental issues. She was working with Christy, was like the super down-to-earth, I guess he'd be a Satanist, but I never preached that. It was whatever your thought was, whatever your moral compass, he had a really good way of just finding a way into it and speaking to you where whatever he was telling you made sense from your point of view. It was a really good gift of his. He died of skin cancer that came on out of nowhere. It took him about a month between diagnosis and when he passed. And that was a long time ago, and it was pretty crappy. But he was a big proponent of magic as a thing. And the only thing for him that defined magic was using your mind to change reality. And for me, I always had this image of myself, and it was this little blob of Tommy inside a big gooiness that was inside this big metal spiky ball, and that was my armor, and that was my nobody can get through this bullshit. And then around that was this like fluffy coating of clouds and cotton, so it hid the spikes, but they were there. So if anybody got too close, I'd jab at them and chase them away. And I was really a pretty deplorable person in my younger 20s. I wasn't very nice. I was hurt, and I was an asshole. And in speaking with Christy and the discussions we would have, in my mind's eye one day, I was just like, I saw myself stand up. Instead of this little ball, I stood up. And that was when Christy went, "You just did your first magic trick." And, but it was a very self-actualizing moment because I perceived myself as a little more whole. And throughout time, when I picture that in my head, I picture basically the cotton and wooliness coming in, the softness getting tighter and tighter against the shell, the hard candy shell, and pulling those spikes in with it. And over the years, it's also been as I've opened myself up and allowed myself to be a little more vulnerable, but at the same time, I'm still pretty guarded, absorbing that hard shell into myself, where it was just me standing. And it was just in my picture, just a big cartoon outline of a person. That was me. And it wasn't until I had my realization that I was a woman was when that picture of me solidified into a strong trans woman. And I was just like, holy shit, that's me. It was a really fun epiphany. And it was just, this is something that took decades. So these kids that are like 15 trying to figure this stuff out some people are, wise before their years. Some of us take a little longer than others. But the experience is so helpful, that experience in life, to be able to put things into different perspectives, to understand that every little thing isn't the end of the world. It's all very important. It helps a lot. And so myself and a couple of other people, we go to the high school, one of the high schools near us, and we go and I just talk to these kids once a month, and just, in some ways, it's like, look, everything can work out. And let them ask questions and stuff. It's pretty cool. We like it. My thing about fear in the VA, which is funny, is, so this is the VAMC. The LGBT coordinators, a lot of the staff there, they want to march in the Pride Parade in a couple weekends. they're trying. They're trying to get the administration to approve it. If they had to, they'd probably just chip in and pay for it themselves. But if they carry the banner that says, VAMC or Phoenix VA, they need approval from the administration. And it's one of those things where the Pride Parade, the reason they don't want to do it is a couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago, it wasn't too long after the stuff where John McCain's report came out, and the Phoenix VA definitely got a lot of egg on its face, and rightly or not, there was a lot of scrutiny on the Phoenix VA in particular. The big issue being long wait times were killing patients. That was what was stated. And because of that, there was a lot of hate thrown at them in the parade. Now, the parade itself tends to be my understanding, I've never actually been, so this is my speculation, the parade seems to be what I've seen videos of, a pretty happy, joyous experience. You don't see a whole lot of protesters, at least in the videos I've seen, and it's about, yay, celebrate, we're here, we're in your face, woo. And I really hope that the administration doesn't let fear of being yelled at or perceived poorly keep them out of a pride parade of all things. I mean, that's kind of the exact point of that parade is fuck all you haters, we are here, we're supporting each other, and we're going to have a good day. And I can't imagine that the administration has more to fear than so many people walking down the street that day that could be losing a job or a family member or has lost loved ones to disease or to violence. There's just so little comparatively to be afraid of, and it's depressing. So I really hope they come down on the side of supporting this, the administration does. If they don't, I will be writing a strongly worded letter to the administration on behalf of the staff that wants to be in the parade and walk. It's going to be hot, it's going to be gross, but hopefully it's fun. Some of the people I know, they set up, it's the parade route and the entrance to Pride is right next to the Phoenix VA. It's in a park right behind it. So like last year and the year before, the doctor that runs our VA support group, she sat out there with a couple of other people at the table on VA property right next to the entrance. They couldn't get approval to be in the parade or in Pride, but they were right there at the entrance, so it was, they were able to at least give out some information, since so few people know that the support from the VA for the LGBT community, and especially for the trans community, is a lot more extensive than people realize. So I want to read what Robot Sunset said here. I feel everything you're saying. As a male, I was broken, abrasive, misogynist, straight up asshole. I feel so free now. I agree to that. I understand those feels. I realized just how much of that, like when I got with my wife, she helped me see how much of that was happening, and I was already starting to make changes to myself. I was raised by a broken, abrasive, narcissistic asshole, and that's how I was socialized, and that's what I learned, that's what guys did. So you're trying to be a guy, you follow your most, your closest example. And my dad was not, he's still around somewhere. Hi, Dad, if you ever watch. But, he is a piece of shit. And I was so happy when I started realizing that, my story earlier about when I started some self-actualization, a lot of that was just realizing how much of an impact on my life he had and getting away from that. And it still then took me another, 15 years or so after that before admitting to myself what was going on. And I say admitting because, again, it was negative at the time. I saw myself as, lesser than because I'm a trans woman. And I definitely feel like an imposter now. I still feel like at any point, any woman has the power over me to revoke my woman card in any situation. If I were in a bathroom, I've never had an issue in a bathroom. But if I did, if some lady came up and raised a stink, her need would trump mine. And that's kind of scary, and it's not a happy place to be in, but it's how I feel. Yes, raging misogynist ends up being trans. Yeah, I mean, how many homophobes do we know that end up being gay? It's like, I never was like a misogynist in the way of like I hated women. I treated people poorly, and I treated people weaker than me poorly, and I was mentally and emotionally, I was a bully, and it was gross. And I see in retrospect, and as I figured this stuff out, I went back and I apologized to all of my old girlfriends. I'm like, I'm so sorry for being an asshole. And more recently, I've gone back and apologized to my old girlfriends because I'm so sorry if I was too rough with your boobies during the wrong times of the month, because oh my God, that hurts. I had no idea. I mean, we talk about, ball pain. There's nothing that they can feel. It's like ball pain, except childbirth, that little thing. But to be hit. But no, it's pretty tender. Things are pretty tender when they're tender. It's a hell of a thing. So yeah, that's my stance on the VA and what they're doing, and I really hope they come down on the side of participating and approving the people that want to participate. Like, I've got at least 3 other doctors that are like, well, we didn't hear anything about this. And I find out that the LGBT coordinators haven't spread the word yet because they don't want people to get excited for something that might not happen. So they're just waiting to find out for sure. Hello. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. Good night. I hope to hear more good news from you, and so glad to hear good news today. So have a lovely night, Matt. Yeah, so it's just been a strange kind of week. Does anybody have like questions and stuff? If you do, use the little box down here, the new one. It's a little question box, and it should pop up questions that I can answer. I don't know if they've been asked, and I just haven't been looking at them. Nope, nobody's asked anything. So otherwise, it just ends up me rambling and drinking on camera as evidence, I guess. I have been thinking a lot about how best to use. I don't have like a massive following base, but it's growing, and there's a few things coming up that I think are going to grow it more, and I want to use the platforms in a good way, and I want to tell my story, but I also don't want it to just be a platform for look at me. I want to be helpful as possible, and so I'm trying to figure out how I can best use the technologies. I've started a YouTube channel. I put all these up there, but I really don't expect somebody to sit there and watch an hour-long episode of this. I mean, this is more for my own archive, and I don't want to have to be responsible for storing all of it. And if I lose a hard drive, I don't want to lose it. I don't want to keep multiple copies, so I'll put it in the cloud and give it to somebody else's computer. Robot Sunset, you say, I like what you're saying about not only embracing being a woman, but being a trans woman. Our femininity is unique and powerful. It's helping me embrace being non-passing. I feel that. I feel that very strongly. What's funny is there are times now that I think I am passing, and the less I care, the more easily I pass. And I think people pick up on the insecurity. And the insecurity, I think, even shows our transiness even more. Like, I don't think that... I know... I want to be careful of my words here. Cis women, from the moment they pop out, are bombarded with messages about what it means to be a woman and how to be a better woman and how they're not a good woman and how their femininity doesn't stack up and what they need to do to make things better. I get that. And that's not what I'm addressing here. It's like, at the end of the day, though, cis women simply know they're women. So there's a confidence that comes in that. It's like, they might be insecure women. They might be insecure about weight, looks, intelligence, any number of factors, what their clothes look like that day. Probably whatever they got picked on most for in high school. But there's still that confidence that they carry with them, and that is, no matter what I look like, fuck you, I'm still a woman. And I think that it takes us a long time to get there. And just having that don't give a shitness helps a lot in how people perceive us. We might be insecure, but I don't know that it's insecure about passing or being treated as a woman. It's just general insecurity because we don't feel like we look nice that day or something, or something like that. And so I think people pick up on those things. I think there's a lot of innate social intelligence that people have that they grow into throughout their life. Hi, Jess. And so even if they don't understand it, people pick up on it. Something's wrong. Especially people that are going to be bullies and going to be assholes about things. They know when something's off, and they're going to look for those things. And what is she most insecure about? That's what I'm going to poke at. Finding our fierceness. And alliteration. I am a big fan of alliteration. Allie, good evening. Hope you had a good day. And what is Allie drinking this evening? Are you drinking anything? Is it a Deschutes Black Butte Porter? Sponsor me. That would be funny. That would be ridiculous, but super funny. Allie, you're going to need to rewind and watch a lot of this, because it definitely... we're talking about a lot of stuff that you were kind of bringing up the other day, and I think that being secure in our selfness, finding our fierceness, being just us, it's not about being happy as a trans woman or as a woman. It's just happy being yourself. And people that are going to give you shit, they're always going to pick up on whatever your weakness is. What are you covering? What are you hiding? Oh, that must be where your heart. Let's go for that. Yeah, people suck. One thing that I'm really, really starting to learn, though, is people suck in general, but specifically, people tend to be awesome. And letting people be awesome is super important, because for myself, I was and still am for the most part. I call myself a realist. Hope for the best, expect the worst. And when you expect the worst from people, what you perceive is the worst. Ooh, 1,000,000,000 points for my shelves. Yeah, so I definitely need to be able to know where to cash in those 1,000,000,000 points. I don't know what for, but I want them for something. And it totally just distracted me from my point. I was just being silly. Somebody put me back on track, or just ask me a question or something else, and give me something different to talk about. Because I don't mind talking about non-transy things too. That just seems to be the thing that is most prevalent in my life right now. And so there we go. That's right, you're talking about Star Wars Lego. I mean, I can't be upset about that, Jess. I love building those sets. They make me so happy. I like that I've been in a place in my life where I can actually afford those things. When I was little, I had Lego, but I didn't have a lot, and I didn't have like the good sets. I had, whatever $10 set here or there that was, our family could afford, and they just piled up. If I expect the worst, you often end up pleasantly surprised. No, it's not true. That's exactly my point. If I expect the worst, I often end up... Well, I see what you're saying. Yes, I do end up pleasantly surprised. It's not pleasant, but the thing is, if you expect the worst, you perceive the worst. If you're looking for the worst... Good night. If you're looking for the worst, you will find it. But if you allow people the room in your mind to do better, then that is where the hope for the best part comes in. The hoping for the best has to be earnest, but again, if there are people I know that run around and they say, my friend was quoting some comedian saying, I'm always wearing rose-colored glasses, so I never see the red flags. There's a perception bias, and there's a difference when, if you're in a bad state of mind and you walk into a restaurant and right when you walk in, two people over at a booth start giggling, you're in a bad state of mind. You're going to take that personally. You're going to assume that they were giggling about you. Maybe they were, but most of the time when you know the situation, because I also worry about being perceived like that, so I'm always watching to see, I don't want to be mistaken. So if somebody just walks in and maybe they have a different look to them of some sort, I would make a point of, if there was laughter coming from the table, saying something loudly enough that they understand it wasn't about them, that sort of thing. Because normally everybody's reactions aren't about you, and when they do become about you personally, unless somebody's setting out to be an asshole, more often than not, people are just getting by day to day and they don't care about us at all. And if they notice anything, whatever we throw out in the universe is going to come back at us, because that's what we're looking for. That's just my point there, I guess. So I gave that advice to somebody when it came to coming out at work. Allow your employer the room to do the right thing. Don't just assume they're going to be jerks about everything and everything's going to end up bad. I've heard, maybe 5 or 6 of my friends have come out at work in the last month or so. And every single one of them tells a good story. Things went so much better than expected. I'm the first person and it's going to be hard, but we're setting policy. One person was asking, though, is like, they wanted to talk to their lawyers. I'm like, well, yeah, they're looking to set standards for LGBT and how to embrace the culture and to make things fair, which means changing HR documentation means they're going to go see a lawyer because they're changing documentation. So yeah, I think, you take that the other way, it's like, oh, they're going to see a lawyer. It's like, it doesn't necessarily mean something bad, Perhaps they're going, well, this person's coming out. Are they going to sue us if we do anything wrong? Maybe. Or they're just going, we want to do this right, and somebody else already knows how to do it, and I bet our lawyer can tell us how to write these policies so they're fair and open, and they'll stand up if anybody does something to violate them. So yeah, HR can be your friend. It helps to be in working someplace that already has things established. A lot of the larger companies, especially multi-state companies, have more open LGBT policies, protections for LGBT people, because some states they're ingrained in the laws and some states they're not, so they're going to go with whatever is the best and less likely to get them sued everywhere. So like I live in Arizona, there are no legal protections statewide for LGBT as a protected class of any sort. So what that means to anybody who doesn't know, if you come out at work, you could simply be fired or kicked out of your home, not your home, but a rental property, for example, just for being LGBT. No other reason, just because they felt like it. So I think Phoenix and maybe Tucson have municipal coverages in the laws for those things, but like in Maricopa County, I think Phoenix is the only city that actually has protections. So if I was renting out here in Gilbert and the landlord found out that I was trans and didn't like that, there would be no ramification to me if they gave me my 30-day notice and quit my lease. So it's a scary situation for a lot of people. So what I was telling like one of the kids today is like, if you're looking for a job, one of the things you can do is look for multi-state companies, look for places that already have their documentation and their rules in order. You're not the first person. First person is always amazing at whatever location and whatever they're doing, but not everything has to be that first person battle for every single individual. Again, the country's been at this for quite some time, so take advantage now of a changing culture and a more accepting, or just people being more aware of how things are going. Easy Holly says, I'm constantly in contact with my HR manager. In fact, we meet regularly to make sure everything's okay with me, and she constantly asks me, what could be done better? That's awesome. Do you work for a small company or a corporation, larger corporation? I'll wait for the answer there. Yeah, it's, one of the first things that happened for me is I was at a transgender meetup group. We were at a wine tasting, and it just came up because I had a brand new job, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm working for CVS. And somebody across the table on the way out was like, hey, I heard you say you worked for CVS. I do too. And she put me in contact with the HR person she talked to. I was so scared. Yes, okay, I think we talked about that. That's right, we talked about that. It's like I just now realized, wait a minute, we had lunch sitting next to each other the other day. Yes, I am awful at names and faces. But I was so frightened to make the phone call just to HR and talk to them, where like I wouldn't do it from my desk, and signal is awful, so I went over to the HR department and asked to get a private room and sat down in a little conference room by myself and called and was very timid and was like, oh my God, what do I do? And talked to the person, and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to put you in charge of somebody who's dealt with that before, and they'll get back to you within a day or two. 3 days later, I got an email from somebody who was just like the most helpful, and I'm sure there's pushing 300,000 employees at CVS at that now. So I'm sure HR has dealt with this a bunch of times. And for me, this is new and scary, and I'm afraid to tell anybody. I'd only really, I think at that point, come out to my wife. And I was just terrified because I had this brand new job, and everything was in writing that things were okay, but I just didn't believe that it could be that easy. And it was ridiculously easy. Like, even when I came out, like 6 months later, it took me that long. It took me from April until November. I came out to the rest of my work. I hate when people say that. I hate when I say that. The rest of my coworkers, November 27th, because it was the day of my name change hearing. And yeah, it was just one of those. I was terrified, and it was when I finally realized the only thing holding me back was that fear of losing my male privilege. I was afraid of being treated like a woman at work, because growing up in socialized male, I see how women are treated at work, and any guy that tells you different is not paying attention, or they're full of shit. Locker room talk happens everywhere there isn't a woman present, and sometimes where there is. It's just a state of being, and it's just way too acceptable. So I was so afraid that was going to be, what I was hearing around me in the workplace, and that people were going to be saying things and then just assuming I couldn't do the job, and I was afraid of so much. And mostly I was just afraid of being judged. So much of the last 2 years is just being, fuck it, so I'm getting judged. What does it hurt? If they're not physically hurting me, if they're not restricting my pay, if they're not hurting my wife, if they're not, doing something visceral, it's all in here. And so the sooner I got to the acceptance in here, as I've said before, we're down to 2 people. As I've said before, if you're offended by something somebody says, or you're hurt by what they say, it's either because you really respect their opinion, or you already believe it, and it hurts, and it's a bad thing. So that's just kind of my take on that. Yeah, it is. How long ago, Holly, did you come out? I mean, there's just like so many success stories for people coming out. It's been just, I wouldn't say it's ridiculous. It's just, it's been long enough that I haven't heard a bad story that I wonder, like, how long has it been since it has been really, really bad? I don't know. And I understand that specific industries might be worse than others. Okay, 4 years ago. Yeah, and I think in the last couple of years especially, there's been so much more visibility for us as a whole that I think that it's almost like we build it up for ourselves because we've spent our whole life, or as long as we were, from our moment of self-realization till when we come out, building it up as this horror in our head. And we hear enough bad stories that it scares the hell out of us. And I think that is, it's wise to stay leery. It's kind of like, when people have, hey Sean, when people have, religious families, people assume automatically, it's like, oh no, it sucks to be you. You're in trouble now. And I still hear a super mixed bag from the super religious side that, you know what, there are a lot of fundamental people that have a lot of problem with this, and there are also a lot of fundamental people that embrace the positive message of their religion and go, you know what, you're still my kid, I love you anyway, and Jesus told me to love you. And so I'm like, okay, that's awesome. But then, I hear also stories, less often, from secular families that just go kind of the same way. It's like, you're my kid, I love you. And I look at my family, my sister accepts me, my gay aunt accepts me, my cousins, my niece, they accept me. My mom, I think she still loves me. I don't think she accepts me. I do know that she drinks a lot harder now. My dad, he knows about me. It didn't give him a heart attack. It could have. We're so close. But my sister told me about that story. It's a story for another day. But it's just like I hear more and more success stories out of this. And a lot of the kids that I talk to, they are in a predominantly Hispanic part of the state. And there's a strong Catholic tie. And so there's that fear of my family's really religious, very Catholic, very conservative, that the fear of rejection. And I hope for every one of them that everything goes well. I hope, because I also know a whole lot of Hispanic kids and adults who have come out to their families and been super supported and loved. But you never know. And when you're that young, you can't just be like, yeah, you should just come out to them anyway, because you might be putting a kid on the street if you do that. It's so scary. So, it's best at that age, try to find other ways to get things out and bide your time. Wait until you're in a better situation. Get educated so you can go away to college. If you can't, find a way to move out, get a job, whatever you got to do. Put yourself in a safe situation. Build up your social circle to have emotional support in case your family doesn't support you. Because if your family rejects you, you really should have somebody else you can lean on. That's a hard road. So by the time I found out if my family would accept me or not, I didn't really care anymore. I love my mom. She's an awesome lady. She was never super involved in my life. My dad made sure that she stayed separated from us. Not physically, she lived with us. She just, whenever things got tense, she'd go read a book and stay out of it. She never helped us out in those ways. She wasn't supportive afterwards. I couldn't be like, Mom, we need to talk. There was never anything like that. We were just, Dad didn't allow us to develop a close bond with our mom. And I don't know if he allowed her to develop a close bond with us. So it wasn't too hard to step away a little further and be like, well, if she doesn't accept me, okay. It's not a happy place to be, but it wouldn't have been soul-crushing. Luckily, she's still around. She is trying to figure out name. She called me Tommy anyway. It was just Tommi with a Y. You can't hear the Y or I inflection, but you can feel it in your brain, I think. And she just has a hard time. I wish she would at least just stick with my name if she can't get my pronouns right. My sister, she's awesome. She came out in November and told me that she was really worried about me and how things would be until she came in the door and I gave her a hug. And she's like, yep, it was still a Tommy hug. It was just like you. You didn't change that much, so I knew you were still in there and I'm going to love you anyway. And I thought that was pretty awesome. That made me very choked up. I was very, very emotional that day when she told me that. She's just trying to figure stuff out. She's confused. Allow your friends and family the room to make some mistakes too, but not so much room that they just walk on you about things, but not everything is an intentional slight. Sometimes things are simply mistakes and take time for habits to change. We're in our heads all the time. Nobody else is. Friends that we only see once a week, we've got 3% of their time. Maybe they think about us 5% if we're lucky. I think about my wife more than anybody, and I probably think about her like 10-15% of my time. Most of the time I'm at work or asleep or talking to you guys. So I'm always here thinking these things, but our friends, they're thinking about us usually when we're in front of them. So they're not practicing over and over necessarily. Some do. Some are awesome. Some are more flexible in their thinking. Some haven't known us as long. But it's, just can't take everything as an intentional slight. That's a very hard way to live your life if you're going to go through all of life being offended by everything, intentionally offended by everything, willfully offended. And that makes things very hard for you emotionally. It's hard to sustain. Yeah, opportunities to educate. Were you able to bring your family around, Holly? I'm curious. But yeah, it's just one of those things. I think that's the theme of the night, is allow people to be awesome. Allow your family that opportunity. Maybe I'll take them. Maybe a lot of parents I hear is like, oh, my kid is dead. That was my dad said to my sister, my son is dead. No, he said, I don't have a son. And I'm just sitting over here thinking, you're right, you don't. Oh no, you finally get it. No, he didn't get it. He was really just thinking his son was dead. And it was just like, well, your loss. I'm a pretty awesome person, so fuck off. I wouldn't talk to you anyway. You've got some atoning to do before I will talk to you. Well, I hope that does work out for you, Holly. I hope that family can come around, and sometimes it might take days. Sometimes it's years. A common thing we say is, maybe for the toxic people in your life, you might have to close that door. And well, one thing, if you got here on time, Sean, you'd know that I'm asking people to ask questions with the question button, because I want to see how that feature works. But nobody's asked any questions through there. You were asking about, do I come up with topics for my live streams? I don't. I just kind of babble and talk about what happened recently, and just try to stay on topic with either current events or just current events in my life. I'm going to do some shorter YouTube things that aren't these hour-long marathons, just so I can be a little more focused and speak directly to a topic and maybe outline it a little bit before I present it. Just because this is all off-the-cuff stuff, and I tried, like the first time I was like, hey, everybody give me questions and we'll see what goes on. And I got a couple of good questions and they sustained the conversation. But for the most part, I don't have enough people on here at any one time to be just generating questions. So having a topic probably wouldn't be a bad thing. as I go forward, I'm trying to get more organized. I'm trying to, as I was stating earlier, I'm trying to use this platform a little more smartly. I just don't know how. I think Samantha's got a lot of angles covered. I see Mika is starting up her YouTube channel, and so I know she's going to have a lot of things covered. Casey does a lot with like makeup and look. Ms. Nuclear. There's a lot of women out there doing some very good outreach, and they cover a wide range of topics. And so I'm still trying to figure out where my niche is, if I have one, if I have to do anything specific. I don't know, because I don't do a whole lot of research on the trans masculine community. I like having trans dudes on my feed, and I love hearing your stories, because it's a whole side to this that I just only am peering into. And it's, we're coming at this from two different sides, which is, I guess that makes it four sides. I've got that, raised masculine experience, and a lot of the trans masculine folk have that raised feminine experience. And so sharing almost tips and pointers, the cultural code switching and talking to the other side is pretty interesting. I think we have a lot of stuff in common that we can share as well. But I think a lot of times these things break down into specifics. Things about voice. Voice is a very common topic, and why I will be putting up someday all of the YouTube videos of all the exercises individually done for individual intonation exercise, articulation exercise, resonance exercise, lip spreading exercise, things like that. And then the other one is hormones. Hormones are just ridiculous. There's a lot of different information out there, and everybody, I just don't know if there's just not enough access to good endocrinologists or what, but there's a lot of junk information. There's a lot of good information out there, but I almost feel like nobody knows how to use Google, and everybody just wants anecdotal evidence, and they want a real answer, but there isn't one, and people don't like hearing that there isn't an answer to hormones. There's just like, every single one of us is a science experiment. So the hormone stuff, I can talk about my story, but I can't do much else on that one. My path coming out at work, things I've done in my life. I don't have any fashion tips, but I don't mind sharing what I'm wearing. But that's also kind of why I've been trying to focus a lot on stuff besides trans issues, especially for Thursday. The Other Things Thursdays is so, all of us are so much more than our transition. Yes, we're trans and real hard, and that's it's a big part of our life right now. But it's not all of us, and at some point, a majority of our transition will have been gone through. And it's just like life. You start off in life, it's that transition between not alive and alive, and it takes a good 20 years to really even settle into some sort of routine. And it's going to be the same way with this sort of transition. It takes a couple of years, but as for a transition, I can't shut up. I don't know how to shut up when I talk about things. It's like talking about my wife. I don't know how to have a conversation without bringing her up. She's been a part of my life for 19 years, and so everything that I have to talk about, she's been there for some of it. So I don't know how otherwise. So it looks like we got a few more people joining, but of course we've got 1 minute remaining. If there's anything else that anybody wants to ask, please go ahead and ask on my Instagram feed. I'm always interested in talking to more people, and so long as we're talking about, life, and it's not just, masturbation. I'm not into being a fetish, and it's not my thing. But there are people out there that you can pay that will enjoy that a lot, because they're trying to pay for whatever they've got going on, and they would certainly like your money. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Navigating this world as a trans woman, I guess, is just one of them. So I've got 15 seconds left. Thank you all for joining, and have yourselves a lovely evening and a good rest of your week. make sure to watch Sam's Trends IRL on Thursday as well. She's got an interesting guest, and it should be fun. Bye-bye.